free because I'll sign up after this.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
John, I don't know if you had the foresight, but was it a year ago? I think Dina had helped organize a meeting with you. It was our Shirley Democratic Town Committee and you. I don't know if you knew something then, but I mean, we weren't in your district. You weren't even elected, but here we are a year later. So it was good to have,
I remember that.
You knew.
No, didn't know anything. I have trouble saying no. That's my problem. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you said yes to us.
So am I. Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess we could go ahead and get started. People might start trickling in because I'm just going to give a little intro first, and then I'll let John speak. But I just want to welcome everybody to the Shirley Democratic Town Committee spring meeting. And I want to encourage you to join us as members, or at least just to come to our meetings. You don't have to be a member to do that, to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I put the @DTC Shirley in the chat so you remember it. We have a website. We have, like I said, the YouTube channel. And we really work hard to try to connect with other communities as well. We have a lot of public forums that everyone is always invited to. It's not limited to Democrats, and you don't have to be a member. So in any case, I just want to encourage you to be part of this, even if you don't want to become a member. And I invited John here. I would have invited him anyway, but a big part of why I invited John is that our district is changing. Our Senate district is going to be the Worcester and Middlesex district, which is what John was elected to in 2020. And it will now be shifting to include Shirley. And so I wanted to give people in Shirley a chance to meet him, to hear what he's been doing, what his vision is, and also to hear from people in Shirley. You know, what are your concerns? What questions do you have? And we only have an hour, but I'm hoping you'll, after John introduces himself and talks a little bit, that you all will ask him questions. And I certainly have some too, but I'm going to hold off until other people ask their questions. So John, I really want to thank you so much for joining us. And I would like you to, go ahead and, sorry, I'm a little distracted here with my computer. I would like to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dina. And first, I just want to thank you for all the legwork that went into organizing this. I appreciate it. And it's important that people get together and have a dialogue with their elected officials. So I am new in this position. I've been in office for a little over a year, but not a day goes by, or at least a week goes by, where I'm in a conversation with another elected official and they say, as a part of why they're advocating for this policy or this reform or this change or this budget line item, the people on the ground are saying this, or they're experiencing this. And so I kind of started and prefaced, with saying, like, I have a tough time saying no to any invitation to come and speak to constituents. And that is really what you can expect from me, and that's my leadership style. And I don't think I could do my job without forums like this. So just to start, thank you all for being here on a weekday night at 6. You could be doing anything, but you're listening to me for a couple of minutes. So every time I say I'll be brief, I go on too long, but I'll just give a little bit of background about who I am, where I come from, the perspective I hope that I bring to the Massachusetts State Senate. And then I would really like to spend the majority of this hour turning this into a dialogue and hearing about the issues that are affecting Shirley. But this is a state Senate seat that for my lifetime has been dominated by some of the big suburban areas that are around us in north central Massachusetts: Fitchburg, Leominster, Gardner. But I grew up and I'm from Lunenburg, so I think it's really important and a part of who I am that I come from a small town. I understand the local politics that affect towns like Shirley and Lunenburg. And frankly, I think it helps me represent places like Shirley because I know what feeling like you're overlooked is like with your elected representatives. And frankly, that's something that in North Central Massachusetts, we face every day in the state legislature. I had a friend and colleague, Eric Lesser, out for a visit, and he is from Springfield, and he's running for lieutenant governor. But he kind of reinforced something that I think we all know, but maybe don't articulate very well to ourselves, that Boston is the cultural, economic, and political center and capital of Massachusetts. And they've got the most senators, they've got the most representatives, they've got the biggest media market, they have the biggest tourism industry, they have the biggest life sciences and biotech. So if we are going to be effective in our advocacy outside of the 128 and the 495 bubble, we really need to come together and speak as one voice. And that's in North Central Massachusetts, that's in Central Massachusetts and Worcester County, that's in everything outside the 495 bubble. We really need leaders who value and prioritize collaboration. So that is one thing in a perspective that both being from a small town and representing a Senate district of more than 170,000 people, and right now 11 cities and towns, and also frankly from being outside the 128 and 495 bubble, being an advocate and being a voice for people who feel like they're not getting their fair share. And I can tell you, that's what we're up against, right? We're up against attention, advocacy, money, political influence of people who make decisions and who have a lot of power, where power is concentrated. So one of the things I am really proud of is my relationships with the state representatives that I get to work with every day. And we are lucky and blessed in North Central Massachusetts to have some great representatives: Dan Cena, Natalie Higgins, Mike Kushmerek, Meg Kilcoyne, John Zlotnick, and this is no hyperbole. I'm in contact with those people every day, and we are in a very real way scheming every day about how do we make sure that our priorities and the things that are most important to North Central Massachusetts are, we can bring that voice to the floor, and it can shape, one, both the legislation that works its way through the Massachusetts legislature and the House and the Senate to the governor's desk, and two, in the budgets, right? We pass a budget that last year approached $47 billion. I think it's going to be closer to 48 or $49 billion. And those budgets are really reflections of our priorities and our values. And so making sure that North Central Massachusetts's priorities and values and unmet needs are reflected in that statement and in that budget is critical to the work I do every day. But I grew up in Lunenburg. I was a hockey player as a kid, and in high school, I played a year of junior hockey for the South Shore Kings. I don't know if any of you are Bruins fans, but Chris Wagner was on my team at the South Shore Kings. His career was taking off and headed to the NHL and the Boston Bruins, where he plays right now. Mine was flaming out. But when I was 19, I got an appointment and started at the United States Military Academy at West Point, and really had the incredible privilege to spend about the next 10 years of my life in active duty service, first as a cadet at West Point, and then I commissioned as a second lieutenant and infantry officer into the active duty United States Army. And there are a lot of people, and this is coming from my experience, and I don't have much, and I don't know much, but I know this. A lot of people sign up for the military thinking that they're going to get one set of experiences or be able to do X, Y, and Z, and then they kind of get dealt a different hand. I had the incredible privilege to do exactly what I signed up for. And I got to commission from West Point as a second lieutenant in the infantry. I spent a year training in Georgia, and then moved on to Fort Hood in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And I served as a platoon leader deployed in Afghanistan for about 9 months, which was leading 40 infantrymen in close combat and really a kinetic environment in Afghanistan in 2014, which was really a remarkable leadership experience for a young person. I had the good fortune to be able to redeploy to Fort Hood, and I think, you know, I have about 1,000 West Point classmates. Maybe 5 or 6 got to deploy twice in key leadership roles at the company level. So I was able to deploy again to Afghanistan as the executive officer with the same core group of 150 soldiers, which was really a remarkable experience. And I was just lucky to do. It was exactly what I signed up to do. And so I had the opportunity to be the second in command for the same infantry company that I had deployed as a platoon leader with 2 years before. Came back, was honorably discharged from the Army as a captain in 2018 and began law school. In between that, in 2018, I started, I got a job as a paralegal at the Legal Services Center at Harvard Law School, and I was doing veterans advocacy for discharge veterans. The work was really focused on discharge upgrades, on people who had a less than honorable discharge because of their sexual orientation, and making sure that they not only got the upgrade that they deserve for their honorable service because of their sexual orientation, but got connected to the benefits that they deserved. So I did that for a year. I started law school in 2019. I am a month away from graduating law school, thank God. As they say in Inshallah, or as they say in Afghanistan, Inshallah, God willing, I'll have a law degree in May, and we'll be able to have some time to hopefully campaign for some Democrats this summer. But I remember being in Afghanistan, you know, on election night, and I remember it like it was yesterday. But it was 2016. I was in Kabul. I was at the end of my second deployment, and frankly, I remember Donald Trump really not just getting the news, but like receiving the news that Donald Trump was going to be the president of the United States. And I point back to that night in Afghanistan after spending really the previous 10 years in doing what I consider at that time, as you know, an 18 or 19-year-old when I joined the service, is the most important work and the most impactful work I could do. I look back at that night in 2016 as a moment where how I wanted to serve changed, and I look back at that night as a thing that I was going in one direction. I love the Army. I love the soldiers that I got to work with. I love the sense of purpose that you got from being in an organization with when you're really with a collective team serving a purpose higher than yourself. But I look back at that night when I thought how that I could best serve my country changed. And I didn't decide that. I certainly didn't decide that I was going to run for office, but I thought I could be a better public servant and be more impactful and do more good for others by finding a different way to serve. If you fast forward 18 months or 2 years, I got discharged as a captain, and was really looking for a way in my community to make government something that I believed in again, and to make sure that our elected leaders reflected the quality of people in not just our country, but the quality of people that I met in our military who served a cause greater than themselves and truly wanted to drive positive change in their communities. And that's, to me, that's not controversial. That's not partisan. We can have really good disagreements and really good discussions and really good debates on what that means and how that manifests itself. But at the end of the day, there are some things that are core values that should transcend party lines or partisanship. And so I wanted to find a way that I could serve the community that I came from, the country that I love, the place that I grew up, And there was somebody in the seat for state senate whose values I didn't agree with, who I didn't believe was an effective leader. And because I was naive or stupid, I went to the Secretary of State's office and I pulled papers and I got on the ballot. And nobody asked me to run. Nobody believed in me. Nobody said, hey, you should do this. It was a bright idea that I had. But because this country is what it is, anybody can go to the Secretary of State's office, pull papers, and talk about their vision for where they believe their community is and where they want to take it, and whether government does or does not have a role in affecting that change. And I believe it does. And so I was really fortunate to just be lucky to meet some great people. I didn't know what I was doing. I'd been in the Army. I'd been an infantry officer. I didn't know anything about campaigning. I had never been a volunteer. I had never been a paid staffer. I'd never worked for an elected official. But I got really lucky and pulled some great people in around me. And that's what it takes. And no small measure of luck. But I have a great staff now, many of people of who worked really hard for me before I was in the position that I am. And, without other people buying into your vision and and the change that you want to affect, that's what it takes. So I had the great privilege to be elected in 2020, sworn in January of 2021. And I've loved my time in the state senate, and I love being the senator for the district and the region that I grew up. And we do really important work every day. State government is where the rubber meets, local government is where the rubber meets the road. But state government is right there. And if you care about healthcare, if you care about education, if you care about housing, if you care about climate change, there is so much opportunity to drive change in Beacon Hill and for our communities. And so the daily grind of going to work and identifying where we can push wins and drag things that we're advocating for over the finish line, and identify places in the budget to invest in our downtowns and increase funding to our school systems. That work is really invigorating and is an incredible privilege. So before we turn it over to turn this into a dialogue, I would just say I am really excited about being able to represent Shirley. Again, I grew up in Lunenburg. I go to Piccolino's, the Pick, more than I'll let you know. Village Pizza is my favorite pizza place. I'm there more often than I'll tell my staff. But I do feel a sense of connection to Shirley from having grown up in Lunenburg. Whether it's Easter's as a kid at the Bull Run, or just a connection of being from a small town and knowing the challenges that we face, going to public schools, played on the Lunenburg Air Shirley hockey team. So we have a state championship title that we all share and can celebrate, that I wasn't a part of, but I'll take credit for it now. You can do that kind of stuff as state senator. But I'm really excited to represent Shirley and to get to know you more and to understand the issues that are in front of the town. And before I turn it back to Dina, I'll just talk about three things that I'm hoping to advocate for to get over the finish line in the next couple of months. So just as we look and kind of backwards plan from the end of the 2-year legislative session, this legislative session is going to end July 31st, and the Senate usually takes up its budget for the next fiscal year in May. And so I just want to kind of talk broadly about some of the big things that we're advocating for, from our office to the Ways and Means Chair and the Senate President Chair, or in the Senate President's office. And frankly, if you follow our office, so we'll be talking a lot about as we move into May and budget season, and as we move toward the end of the legislative session, and frankly, where we've kind of found a niche for our office. And I think every legislator wants to find a space that they can lead in. And it's a space that they can lead in that's meaningful and impactful for their district. And as a freshman, that's tough. But I think we've done some really good work over the past 15 months and identified some things that frankly we are carrying the water for, and we are looking to deliver wins. The first is a program called, and I'll preface these three initiatives with kind of the context and the picture of the problem as we see it, not just in the district, but across the state. So I think one of the things that informs the work we do and who I am is the family that I come from. And like everybody on this call, one way or another, our families or our grandparents or great parents came to this country from somewhere else at some point. Unless you're one of the indigenous peoples in Massachusetts. And my grandfather grew up in a household in Jamaica Plain in Boston, in a big Irish community, and neither of his parents had a high school education. They had no formal education. Both immigrated as basically children from Ireland and got off a boat and figured it out. But my grandfather grew up in that household with two parents, none of who, and I don't believe my great-grandfather could read or write, but none of who had formal education. And the opportunity that he encountered in his life growing up in Boston in the 40s and 50s and 30s, he went from a household where his two parents didn't have a high school diploma to becoming a doctor. And that happened in one generation. And sometimes, it's like one of these things where I'm in the car and I think about that. And I think about the problems that working class families face. And I ask myself, could that happen in America today? And how often does it happen in America today? Not often, right? Less often. And Susan Templeton is my district director. She's with us. She can validate this, but we talk about social mobility and creating opportunity for young people every day, whether it's going to be affected through the budget or otherwise. And so to me, I remember one of the first meetings that I had as state senator was with Jeremy Roach, who's the principal of Fitchburg High School. And what he said was that about 25 to 30% of the students have a parent or two parents, the students at Fitchburg High School, who don't have a high school diploma. So how do we change that? How do we get those kids to, maybe not become doctors, but just enter the middle class? How do we change generational cycles of poverty? And that is what colors, I think, the majority of work in our office. And I don't care if we're talking about healthcare or housing or workforce development or education or higher education. How do we create more opportunity for families to encounter so that they can enter and remain and keep themselves and their children in the middle class? And if we're not doing that, and if we're not talking about that, then what are we really doing? So our work is focused right now in the next, say, 90 days between now and, or 60 days in the end of the Senate budget, on creating more work-based learning opportunities for people who frankly are at risk of not going to get an associate's degree or going to higher education. And I mean, be it at Mount Wachusett or be it at Fitchburg State University. The people who are graduating high school or tinkering with maybe not graduating high school, we want to give them something, right? We want them to encounter a pathway to the middle class, and we want them to be able to do that through local coordination and local programming in North Central Massachusetts. And right now, for every vocational seat that exists in Massachusetts, there is 1.75 applicants. So we have a wait list between, I think, 5,000 and 6,000 8th and 9th graders longs to access vocational schools. And this is something that, frankly, we're militant on. Our vocational schools have become selective. in our vocational schools is shutting the door to too many kids who really need the opportunity to learn a trade. And this is something we filed legislation for, this is something that we're advocating and frankly fighting like hell for. But to get into a vocational school right now, you are rank ordered based on your grades in middle school, attendance, disciplinary record, and guidance counselor interview. And there is data that exists now that hasn't existed 5 or 10 years ago. And that shows one thing, right? It shows that grades, attendance, disciplinary record, and guidance counselor interview are predictors of socioeconomic class, the color of your skin, and whether or not you have a disability or not. So right now in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 2022, we've got discriminatory criteria that is keeping kids who come from poor families out of vocational schools, and it makes my blood boil. And so we have filed legislation to reform the admissions criteria to a blind lottery, and that would affect one simple change, right? That would make sure that every kid who is an 8th grader has an equal chance to the kids sitting next to them in middle school to access a trade. And the implications, I think, are really profound. One, it means that more kids who don't have the opportunity to get an associate's degree or to go on to a 4-year college are given something, right? And there are dollar sign implications to this, right? It costs 150% of the cost to send a kid to Monty Tech as it does to Fitchburg High School or Air Shirley High School, 150% of the investment. So in many cases, we are investing 150% as much to send a kid who is bound for WPI or bound for a 4-year college to learn something that they don't need to enter the workforce, right? So that is legislation that we filed, that we are advocating for, that frankly we are fighting other stakeholders about, that that I think is really important and can have a huge effect. And if you go talk to any small business owner, any medium-sized business owner, any large industry, not just in North Central Massachusetts, but anywhere, they are struggling to find help. And they are struggling to find young people with the hard skills and the soft skills to enter the workforce. So I just don't believe you can have a serious conversation about social mobility or breaking cycles of intergenerational poverty or creating opportunity both here in North Central Massachusetts or for young people across the state without talking about creating pathways.
Excuse me,
So
John,
yes.
Forgive me for interrupting. What bill is that you're talking about?
I don't know the number, but it did not get reported favorably out of the Education Committee, but there's an omnibus vocational school reform bill that did get reported out. And so right now we are advocating for that bill to come out of Ways and Means to the Senate floor. And I will add it as an amendment when that goes through the legislative process. But I think it speaks to how hard it is to get anything done or anything passed. I mean, you really need to build a coalition, and it's hard to pass legislation. It's harder to pass legislation when you've been in a body for 15 months. So part of our job is educating other members to the issues. There are people who are focused on just healthcare, just housing. So Dina, we'll get that for you.
Thank you.
But the bill is dead for this session, but we're hopeful that we can continue the conversation, and frankly, that we can get the executive branch to act on it. We have a meeting, both myself and the education chair, Jason Lewis, are meeting with Commissioner Riley, who I have great respect for, and I think has done a great job. But we're going to push him, and that meeting is happening a week from now, to see how he plans move DESE moving forward. So that's one thing in terms of filing legislation. Just to pivot briefly, and Dina, I promise, give me 5 more minutes and I'll be done. But there are 3 things that we're really advocating for in this budget. The first is early college. Is anybody familiar with the early college program in the state? So what's really exciting is I believe it is being expanded to Air Shirley High School this year, but it's if you have college age children, like, listen up right now, or if you have middle schoolers, listen up, or a grandchild who is entering their high school years, listen up, because I could save you about $100,000. But early college is a program that got off the ground less than 5 years ago. It was funded at, I think, $2 million 2 fiscal years ago, $5 million in the last fiscal year, and I am advocating to increase funding for it to $10 million. But it exists in Gardner, Fitchburg, and Leominster right now, and I believe is expanding to Air Shirley either this year or next year, or Air High School, excuse me. But early college gets juniors and seniors into their local community college to take courses for credit. So it means that there was, and I'll give you an example, there was a senior at Gardner High School last year who graduated with an associate's degree from Mount Wachusett Community College the day before she graduated from high school. And so it is a way specifically targeted at first generation students to earn college credit while they're in high school, and to take the prohibitive barriers to higher education and to dramatically bring them down. And what I love about these programs is, for a first generation college student, the people who are able to enter these programs, they are the numbers that we are getting back and that DESE is getting back right now. Those students who are able to participate in this program, who are first generation college students, are more than twice as likely to graduate with not just an associate's degree, but to go on and pursue a higher education degree. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense on a really simple level. It takes a kid who doesn't come from a family with people with bachelor's degrees or higher education, and it puts them in an environment with a college professor and college age kids, and it shows them, hey, I can do this, or hey, this isn't so scary, or hey, I've earned 16 credits and I'm only 48 credits away from an associate's degree, or so it makes and exposes young people to really the potential, and makes gaining a higher ed degree reasonable and attainable. And the best part is it costs family nothing. It costs families $0. The kids just need to sign up. So if you want to, it costs what, $75,000 to go to Boston College for 1 year, you can cut that in half, and you can have your high schooler graduate with an associate's degree. And it's short money for the state to give this funding to community colleges. So it was funded at $5 million last year. We're trying to double it to really rapidly expand the reach of the program. But the reach of the program is here in North Central Massachusetts. So it's something we're really excited about. Number 2 is innovation pathways. So these are programs that are aligned to regional labor markets in comprehensive high schools. And so Fitchburg and Gardner have advanced manufacturing pathways at Fitchburg High School and at Gardner High School, which give course room instruction to juniors and seniors aligned with a regionally prevalent industry. And in North Central Massachusetts, we've got a long history of advanced manufacturing and a lot of advanced manufacturing companies. So Gardner and Fitchburg have relationships with industry where kids are getting classwork, and it's not your mom and pop's manufacturing opportunities, right? I mean, you go to these places, there's 3D printing going on, there's CAD programming going on. These are really good paying jobs that the employers in our region can't fill fast enough. They're hungry for young people with the skills that they need. And we have kids at Fitchburg High School who are graduating from the advanced manufacturing innovation pathway and entering the workforce at $60,000 a year, right? So that boom, like that kid is in the middle class, and that is an opportunity that we need to expand across the Commonwealth. And so one of the probably the number one primary accomplishment that our office has been able to achieve is in the last fiscal year 22, when we went through the budget process in May. For the first time, we were able to get innovation pathways, which are these programs, and they're not limited to advanced manufacturing. They also include IT, healthcare. They're aligned to, the need, the local and regional need where these schools are. But we were able to get these programs in the state budget for the first time. And that's an amendment that I sponsored in the Senate. I spoke on and gave my maiden speech. We got innovation pathways $600,000. Before, it had been funded through really a patchwork of skills capital grants from the executive branch and nonprofit funding through a nonprofit called American Student Assistance. But we were able to get a new line item in the budget, which is really hard to do. And so this year we're going back, and we want to, I'm critical about of Governor Baker on some things, but his attention and focus to this area, I think, is on point. So it was a amendment that we got in the Senate budget that passed the FY22 conference committee and was passed into law last year. And this year in the governor's budget, he wants to increase that funding to approximately $5 million. And those are the type of advancements, or those are the type of investments in young people to support our workforce, to grow our middle class that we need to double down on. And so I'm really excited about that, and want to make sure that we sustain that funding in the House and the Senate budget, and the House and Senate budget, and send it back to the governor. And then briefly, the third thing that we are fighting for is the career technical initiative. As I said, the number one thing as I go around the community, and it doesn't matter where I am, what town or city, is people are hungry for and desperate for people to join the workforce. And so there's so many people who have been displaced because of COVID. And then we just know
I hate to interrupt. I'm worried that we're going to run out of time and not have time.
Let's stop here. We got 20 minutes of. I was really brief, like I promised I would be. So.
I do just want to put in a plug for Air Shirley Regional School District, where students are taking college courses and getting credit, and that we have a lot of STEM programs, which we can have more, but we have CAD and all kinds of things, and we have a really terrific robotics team that is pushing to have the robotics in every single community in the state, and they have been meeting with Governor Baker about that also. But I want to just give people time for questions, and I so appreciate all the work you've been doing, and thank you so much for introducing us to what you've been working on and your background. We really appreciate that. I did want to open it up for some questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Who would like to begin? I have questions, but I want to let you ask questions. Okay, Brian?
Sure. Thanks, Senator. It's wonderful to hear of all these great initiatives. You clearly have a ton of passion and enthusiasm, and so that's inspiring. So thank you. A number of us in Shirley have been actually working with folks in the region, including Lunenburg, to advance quality of life improvements around particularly conservation and recreation opportunities. And we're exploring currently with even folks in Lunenburg, how can we explore conservation and recreation opportunities like trails and our shared bike infrastructure across our towns? And that seems to be an issue where there's local interest for growing our open space protection and conservation. And at the same time, we're looking at this across towns, so that rises to sort of a multi-town approach. And it seems like a nice place where then your office and the state can start to enter as a nice partner when a few towns in a district are trying to do something together. I don't know if you've experienced that, or maybe it's just something we pick up down the road, but we're excited about the momentum, and I was curious if you had any guidance for how we might start to seek some support from the state for grants that can help leverage these shared cross-town conservation and recreation partnerships.
Yeah, so Brian, you probably know about more opportunities than I do. I would say one thing that that I get a lot of energy from and have been able to work with my partners in the House of Representatives on is rail trails, right? And it's recreation, it's conservation, and it's partnerships that cross town boundaries. And I'll give one example. So we did an ARPA spending bill in December, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Squanicook rail trail project, but it's really exciting, right? And it is not a top-down effort, right? It is absolutely grassroots. Peter Cunningham on the Groton Select Board, I've had a number of conversations with the Select Board in Townsend, but through the ARPA spending bill that we did in December, myself and, I worked with Senator Kennedy and Representative Harrington, but we were able to get $100,000 for the Squanicook River, the Squanicook Rail Trail. And I'm really excited about that. And that is something in an investment that, it's really a legacy that everybody who's involved with the project is giving for the community, and it's something that everybody has access to. So this is something I probably need to get smart on, and I'm sure Senator Eldridge, who's a friend and been a mentor to me in the Senate, can do. But I know there's opportunities for us to go right north from Shirley. Or I don't know what the rail trail patchwork looks like, but those are not just a line item through the Mass Trails program that I've advocated for, but it's also something that we have the ability to shape during earmarks through the budget process, through different spending bills, through different supplemental budgets. So those are opportunities where I would say, come to me with an idea, come to me with a project. And frankly, I've done it before, and nobody's against rail trails. Nobody's against parks. Those are great investments in our community.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for your support so far. And we look forward to talking further. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Gordon, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think I posed it to you also in an earlier email. I'm one of these people who grew up in what I call the country. I grew up in Shirley and felt like I came from a rural community, but I went away to school, got educated and so forth. But I retain a passionate belief, as many of my neighbors feel, for what's wonderful about what's rural. And just because a town is small and people may not be as known or aren't walking around as celebrities doesn't mean we aren't smart, we aren't sensitive, we aren't choosing something, and we certainly value what we have. In the pressure for economic development, which I think is in principle a good thing, economic development can be done in a way that is constructive and wonderful. The kind of initiatives you're working on to support, a younger generation getting trained for the right kind of jobs for companies that are going to be the companies for tomorrow. I'm totally with you on that. I think it's wonderful that you're doing that work and your office is focused on that. At the same time, as you've stated in your preamble, the world revolves around Boston, and often at Beacon Hill, it dictates what's happening everywhere. So out here beyond 495, where the deer and the antelope reign, sometimes the concerns of people who value rural life get ignored. So I'm concerned, and I guess my question has to do with how to sort of resist and contain and shape what I'll call urban sprawl as a negative, how to protect open space and green space and the rural character of some of our towns in a way that doesn't shut down economic opportunity and doesn't factor in everything that we need to sort of factor in, whether it's social justice or green thinking, or chances to sort of really be the communities for the future that we need to be. So I'm interested in any thoughts you have about how to proceed in a sensible way when it comes to economic development, not simply overwhelming what we think is a really wonderful way of life that many of us have chosen.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think especially as Boston and Greater Boston booms, that westward expansion right along the commuter rail, right? I mean, you can draw a line from North Station to Alewife to Shirley, where I used to get on the train to go to law school, to Fitchburg and Leominster. Change is coming, right? So I think what's imperative is that we identify and we get energy around and we advocate for the things that are important to us. And we make sure specifically for our farmers that we're advocating in ways that that are important and impactful. And we do that through the budget, for example, in a couple of ways. One way is and I would just say, like, the way that people make a living farming has changed from what it was. I would say when I grew up, when I was in high school, I had a job for Jim Latanzi, who's the owner of Hollis Hills, before he was the owner of Hollis Hills. But we were just haying, and people, there was almost like a barter economy among farmers that I think as farmers' families have had younger generations that have gone on to different things, and how family farms has just become harder and harder to do, certainly over my lifetime. The opportunities have kind of changed. So how do we protect, the character of Shirley, the character of Lunenburg, the things that are important to us? One, we just need to speak up and organize around it, right? And instead of farmland becoming a development for 8 McMansions, we say no. So, but that takes political will and political activism, and people to rally and fight. And I think one of the things that I'm wary of is wading into local zoning issues, or local economic development issues. And I think it's hard, but one of the things that my office tries to do is wait for a consensus to come out of the town. And I've been close to this in Lunenburg. There are some big questions about what we do with this parcel, whether it should be conserved or it should become affordable housing so we can hit 10%. And those are things that I look to the local select board to find and build consensus on. And then once there's consensus, when the select board, it doesn't need to be unanimous, but when those people who are elected at the local level come to me for support, I mean, those are the ways that I will do everything I can to support at the state level. So I don't know if that's a very good answer. I'll tell you one thing that I am really excited about, that's a good program that I'm advocating for, is the Healthy Incentive Program. And so it gives state subsidies and directs them to people who qualify for SNAP benefits, and it gives that money to local farmers and growing places. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them, but they're an incredible nonprofit in North Central Massachusetts. And those are ways that we can sustain our agricultural economy. And if we're sustaining that economy and those margins make sense, then that's how we support our farms. That's how we keep them alive. That's how we keep them vibrant. And that's how we maintain the character of Shirley in places like Lunenburg.
Any other questions? Betty? Betty, I can't hear you. You have to unmute.
We have 3 prisons in Shirley, and Jamie Eldridge has done a wonderful job with the prison work, and I'm just hoping you will continue his efforts in that area. He's been protecting people who have been punished uncalled for, and filed a bill against isolating prisoners and throwing them in the hole and leaving them there for long periods of time. And he's always on that case. And if he weren't on that case, there would be a lot more punishment for the men, and that they don't deserve. And that's why I'm hoping you'll talk to Jamie and find out what he's done in that area.
No, I appreciate that, and I think one part of my background and experience that I didn't share was so I graduated from high school in 2008, and I spent a year playing junior hockey, but I worked during that year, and it was part-time. It was 24 hours a week at the Worcester County House of Correction as a janitor, and my job during that year was to go into the suicide block and Maxi B in West Boylston at the Worcester County House of Correction. And that was the place that was 23-hour lockdown. And so my job during that year was to go into the cells while the inmates showered and sweep, mop, clean the toilet, take the trash out. And I can tell you, I learned a lot during that year. And one was, it was the first time that, frankly, like I had ever met or encountered people with serious mental illness. And so I would say part of my life experience, and this is something I've encountered really close to home in my family too, is understanding the intersection and the tragedy of us incarcerating and jailing our way out of mental illness. These are not stories or cases with happy endings. I've got two siblings. One is schizoaffective, one is schizophrenic, and there are no cures for those diseases. But they have had multiple encounters with law enforcement, and that 18 or 19-year-old who is in that environment, I think I understand viscerally the over incarceration of people who are mentally ill. And one of the things that I'm proud of that I won't say that I've led on, but that the Senate is leading on, is its investment in growing the workforce in the mental health treatment force across the state. And in the ARPA spending bill we did in December, we allocated $122 million for loan repayment and scholarships for people entering every level of care in the behavioral health workforce. And I know I'm kind of going off topic, but I'll just briefly say, I think at the root of the incarceration problem is a mental health treatment system that is broken. And this is the context of the problem as I understand it, and I think our office encounters it. But I want to say there's approximately 800, and I think the delta is right, but I might have the big numbers wrong. There's approximately 800 licensed inpatient mental health beds in Massachusetts. And as we were going through the ARPA process, 600 of those licensed inpatient beds were not able to be filled with patients because there wasn't the workforce to support them. And that's broad. We weren't just out of psychiatrists. We weren't just out of sitters. We weren't just out of psychologists. We weren't just out of psych nurses. There weren't enough of any of them. So we had beds that are in hospitals, that are in buildings that we could not put patients in because we do not have the mental health workforce to support it. And if you don't get treatment, right, and if you're in a crisis, and if you're kicked out of your house, and if you're boarding in an emergency department, at some point you're going to be arrested, right? And at some point there's going to be no place else for you to go but a jail. And so I don't have all the answers. I don't know the cure for schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia. we need to grow that workforce. We're making some really important investments in it right now, but it's tough work. And I don't believe for a minute that it's over, or that we're making a big dent. But a part of that issue is providing dignified treatment for people with severe mental illness.
Well, thank you for that. You sound like a sensitive young man and a kind person. And I'm glad to meet you. You have the Irish gift of the gab.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm Irish too, so
Good.
I'm a Murphy, but yeah.
This comes up during March. That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, Jamie has done a lot of work in that area, and you know, if you could support what he's done and go forward with it, that would be good.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just want to let you know, John, that Betty's done a lot of work with the Alternatives to Violence program in the prisons, and so he knows them inside and out. And, I also wanted to introduce Brian and Sherry Anders, who are on our Greenway committee, and let you know who else is here. Kendra is a member of the Democratic Town Committee, and Gordon has been very involved, I believe, in, I sent John some information about a couple of issues we're very concerned about in Shirley, which is the truck traffic. We have a couple of big trucking facilities that are in the works that we're extremely concerned about. We're already seeing a lot of increased 18-wheeler traffic in Shirley, and our roads are terrible. And the other issue that I touched base with him on, well, I sent it to Susan actually, the MBTA community zoning law that was recently passed that is going to require us to zone for basically 750 multi-family housing units within a half mile of the train, which would increase our population if they were actually built by like 37%. Because if you don't include the prison population, we only have a population of about 5,300 in town. And we are, as you know, really lacking affordable housing. So I just wanted to mention those things. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about either one of those, John. I know we're just about out of time, so we might have to just have you come back.
I will hold myself to 30 seconds to each. And I know I've broken that promise 3 or 4 times tonight already. But on the trucking issue, we work with MassDOT all the time, right? We want our roads to be safe. And I think there's an understanding that as businesses come into towns, the nature of the roads change, and we need to react and make sure that our roads reflect that, and again, don't change the nature of the town. So what I would ask is that the select board engage our office. This is not, again, this is one of those areas where if there's consensus in the town about the way forward, or what there's an ask that the select board identifies and advocates for, we will bring it to MassDOT. If it's a safety issue that's kind of micro local that we can engage on, we will. And then on the MBTA issue, frankly, I would say the cost to build one unit of housing is approaching $450,000. And I can tell you, in Fitchburg and Leominster, we are hungry to build housing, and we can't find the capital or the investment to do that. So there is a feedback period that is open right now that I am tracking, where we're able to provide feedback on that regulation for, to build up to 750 units. We are happy to speak out and to say, hey, that right solution in Somerville is not the right solution for Shirley. And I'm happy to engage with the select board on that. Beyond that, I just don't think it's feasible that change is going to happen, or that the character of the town is going to be altered in any way anytime soon, just because of the incredibly prohibitive cost of housing as it exists right now.
I tried to make a comment on the MBTA communities draft, there was no place to actually make a comment. So if you do happen to find that, or maybe Susan can find it, I could send
Yeah,
it.
reach out to us and we're happy to work that with you.
I appreciate that. And I didn't finish introducing people since we're just about out of time and there's not that many more people here. I wanted to just let you know that Elizabeth Johnson is also a member of the Shirley Democratic Town Committee. She happens to be running for school committee. And Deborah Roy is the director of our library, the Hazen Memorial Library. And Allison Tochi is on, and she's one of the owners of who runs the Bull Run. And so I just wanted to go ahead and thank everybody for coming and participating.
Yeah, I'm also here. I'm
and
Gaynor.
Thank you,
Hi.
Gaynor.
Yeah, I work for the National River Watershed Association, John, so I look forward to getting to know you well, and I'm sure we'll have many, many conversations about protecting water and land.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to, I know we kind of touched on the surface level on a lot of issues tonight, but I put my email in the chat, my official business email. We don't say no to meetings. We get reached out to by about 100 people every day on different issues. So if we don't get right back to you, and like, please email us again. We just, sometimes we lose things, not often, but we don't say no to meetings. So we are happy to meet and engage on all the issues that are in front of Shirley and the region, and really just looking forward to getting to know all of you more as we move forward.
We really appreciate it. I really appreciate everybody coming, and thank you so much, John, and thank you, Susan, for meeting with us, and we hope we'll have many more.
Looking forward to it. All right, see you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Hi, thank you.